You remember that nerdy kid, the one in middle school who spent a lot of time on the internet and dressed up in weird costumes? And sure, all that time on the internet and computers netted me a good job, but it wasn't my passion. That passion? Photography. And it turns out that photography was something that was already in my blood. So if you like cameras, film, chemistry, history, adventure, and a little bit of exploration, then I think we're going to get along just fine. Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Alex Oakes and today I have a very special video for you today. I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite classic black and white films, and I'm not talking about Kodak Panatomic X or Plus X. Instead, I am talking about the Efke line of film. Yes, thanks to my generous friend James Lee, I have gotten my hands on one more roll of Efke KB100, a classic black and white emulsion. But enough of me talking about it. Let's go back to the studio and I can tell you a little bit about the history of Efke, where it came from, why it's no longer produced, how you can still shoot with it somewhat today, and my own personal experience with it. And I'll meet you back here in a moment. The history of Efke doesn't actually start with Croatia, but rather Germany. The original Adox is the world's oldest photographic supply company and made their name with dry plates. But after the Second World War, the use of plates in photography had narrowed to a few niche applications, and roll films were becoming popular among both professional and amateur photographers. So in response to that, Adox introduced 3 films in 1952. These were unique in that they boasted a high silver content, wide latitude, excellent tonal range, were both sharp and fine-grained at the same time. The image quality out of these quickly earned them the nickname the German Wunderfilms. Adox would continue to sell and produce these films under their branding until 1962, when the founder's family sold the entire photographic options to the American firm DuPont. DuPont would only make use of this technology for about a decade before selling it to the Yugoslavian firm Fotochemica in 1972. Fotochemica gained the patents, the technology, the technique, and the entire contents of the coating factory, everything but the actual Adox name. So they started producing the original Adox film under their own brand, Efke, starting in 1972. They would produce this film in 35mm, 127, 120, and sheet films. And the problem is that because Yugoslavia was still on the other side of the Iron Curtain, rarely did these films make it out west, at least until the 1990s. That's when the Iron Curtain fell, and a small camera shop in Berlin, ZoneImaging, started up in 1992 and began to import these Eastern films into Western markets. When ZoneImaging regained control of the Adox name in 2003, they would begin to contract Fotochemica to begin producing the films under the Adox CHS Art brand once again. But at this point, the machines were starting to get old, and production would continue into the 21st century until 2012. By this point, it's been 60 years since these machines were originally made, and maintaining them was no longer economically viable. There were some efforts to save Fotochemica and the Efke line, but Yugoslavia still wasn't a part of the European Union, and some government grants were not available. So production would cease in 2012. But ZoneImaging would go on to reintroduce a modern 100 speed option called Adox CHS 102 in 2015. So I first learned about Efke film through Freestyle Photographic in Hollywood, California. And I learned about freestyle through the Film Photography podcast. So we're talking about 2010 at this point. I went nuts for these films, and I ended up buying mostly the 50 and 100 speed stuff. And so I first learned about Efke film through the Film Photography podcast. They were talking about this amazing camera store in Hollywood, California called Freestyle Photographic. So we're talking about 2010 at this point. I was just getting into using black and white films at this point and absolutely went nuts for this stuff. I bought it under both the Adobe brand, the Efke brand, and the Roll-Eye brand as well. I ended up buying the 25, the 50, and 100 speed stuff. And the 50 and 100 speed became fast favorites of mine, and I can actually probably point my love of slow films to my use of these Efke films. The 50 speed stuff sang in my urban exploration adventures, and it just was different from all the other black and white films that I was using at the time. It had an old school look, it had a punch to it, and it wasn't fine-grained by modern standards, but it certainly made for great images. And while I do like CHS 100 too, for the same reasons, but these days it is really difficult to get my hands on it. All right, so as you can see, I will be shooting my Nikon F5 today with the newly acquired 20mm f2.8D Nikkor lens. And in it, I'm of course loading a roll of Efke 100. This has a 2015 expiry date, so it is from the very last batch that was made. Now, despite it being 10 years old this year, I'm still going to be shooting it at its box speed of ASA 100, and I'm going to be developing it in ZoneImaging 510 Pyro at a 1:100 dilution. All right, why don't you come over here? We can get this thing loaded, and then we can go on a photo walk. All right?
Just a little more. My mind is wide. Aching at the core. Do we ever learn before it's too late? Why we keep falling through aeons? Should I be leaning on each other?
Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm here today in Hamilton, Ontario, specifically the historic town of Dundas. Yes, one of the oldest urban centers in this part of Ontario. It's a favorite spot for me to come and shoot, and I think makes for a great spot to polish off this roll of Efke 100. Also, I wanted to mention that today is officially World Photography Day. Yes, I am photographing this on August 19th, so that makes it extra special. Because, well, any day I get to go out and take pictures is a special day. All right, enough of me talking. Let's get a nice cozy photo walk in.
Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling through aeons? Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling through aeons? Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling through aeons? Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling through aeons? Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling through aeons? on each other all the way. Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep falling, falling through aeons. Should I be leaning on each other all the way? Why we keep waiting, waiting for aeons. If you take my lead, it's you that I adore. Why don't we go high and trust in foolish hearts? It's why we keep falling, falling through aeons. We should be leaning each other all the way. Why we keep waiting, waiting for aeons. Let's spin around and run back through the gates. Why we keep calling, wandering aimless. Let's go together back to where we belong.
Well, this seems like a great time to send you back home, where we're going to develop this roll of Efke 100 together, and I can talk a little bit about the special circumstances that and techniques you need to use when developing old films such as the Efke KB line of films. While you're doing that, I'm going to shoot off a bit of my D750 and a roll of Kentmere 200 in my Rolleiflex 2.8F, and I will meet you back here to wrap things up nicely. The first thing you need to realize about Efke films is that you need to take a little extra care when developing them at home. This goes for any Efke rebadges, including Adox CHS Art and Rollei Pan films. These emulsions are far more fragile than modern films, but a little more on that later. You can use pretty much any modern developer with these film stocks, although I would recommend ones that offer up a bit more grain reduction while offering up good sharpness. You're also going to want to go with a developer that is potentially dilute. The one style of developers that I found that works best is pyro-based developers, so things like PyroCAD HD or 510 Pyro. They offer up the best of both worlds because they can keep that grain under control while enhancing that wide tonal range. So, as I mentioned before, the emulsions are a little more fragile than your modern ones, so the first thing you're going to not want to use is an acid stop bath. Ask me how I know about that. An acid stop bath will cause damage to the emulsion and can cause it to flake off the base. So you're going to want to strictly stop using water only. And if you're a little uncomfortable with doing that, you can always increase the amount of time that the film is in the stop bath from 1 minute to maybe 2 or 3, or just run it under running water like I do for a couple of minutes. Another thing to note is that you will need a hardening fixer for these films, but most rapid fixers will work on this. And I know it's a bit of an oxymoron saying use a pyro developer and then use a non-hardening and then using a hardening fixer. So you're going to lose some stain, but you're going to better protect your emulsion. Then let them hang to dry and handle with extreme care when wet. Once totally dry, you're good to go, but you still have to be a little bit more careful because they do scratch far easier than modern emulsions. Starting at the slowest option is Efke 25. This is one film that I thought I hadn't shot a lot of, but ended up learning that I shot way more, mostly because I shot this film under the Rollei brand. But I did get it at some point in 4x5 sheets. When I first shot this film in 2010, the images came back overdeveloped, but then I think my lab started to get the hand of this film, and I found a stock with lots of character. Fine grain, sharp, lots of latitude. I didn't hand develop this one much, but the one roll that I did do was in 510 Pyro, and it made the film look good. It also looked really good in PMK Pyro also. Probably my favorite from the trio is Efke 50, the middle option. This stock became a go-to favorite of mine for my urban exploration adventures, and I got some of my favorite shots of the old Firestone plant in Hamilton using this film under the Adobe CHS art branding. It's clean, it's smooth, fine grained, sharp, lots of latitude, and a contrast that just won't quit, especially when shot behind good German optics. I think out of all the stocks, this is the one I miss the most. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, Efke 50 is the reason I still gravitate today towards slower films like Ilford Pan F+. Probably the most accessible of all the films is Efke 100, and it's the fastest, being rated at ASA 100. This is the one that took me a bit more to like than the slower two, and it does have the same excellent tonality, contrast, and latitude, but it also shows the most grain of the bunch, especially when processed in sharp developers like Haudenosaunee and PMK Pyro. But that doesn't mean it's a bad film. I still like it, and it works great in slow-acting, fine-grained developers. Also, it's the one that became most accessible after production shut down because someone basically bought a whole whack of the stuff and was selling it in bricks on eBay, and I think I got a couple of bricks, maybe just one, but yeah, there's still a few rolls of it floating around, including the one I shot today is from James Lee's fridge. But yeah, if you want to get into Efke films, 100 is probably the best place to start. Okay, so that wraps it up for this video. I hope you have enjoyed my waxing poetic about Efke films. They are truly a long-standing favorite of mine since I first started using them, especially the ASA 50 flavor. And the best part is that I have managed to acquire 4 rolls of Efke KB50, the 35mm version, which I'm going to be working on writing a classic film review to go along with my Efke 100 classic film review blog. And you can find a link to the Efke one in the description below. Also in the description below, you can find a link to my blog post about my photo walk today and see both the Efke 100 rolls, the Kentmere 200 rolls, and some of my digital images. Also, if you are in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, on the last Sunday in September, I am hosting a photo walk here in Dundas, Ontario on Sunday afternoon starting at 12:30. You can find a link to the photowalk.me website where you'll find all the details about the walk if you want to take in and capture some of the gorgeous buildings and homes that this historic town has to offer. Also, let me know in the comments, what are your experiences with older Efke or Adox film stocks? What are your favorites? And as always, my name's Alex Laux. Shoot what you love, with what you love, on what you love. Don't stop.